Charmander, it is now time to end your hibernation. The long-awaited release of Metroid Dread is upon us. It means we're gonna buy it. Welcome everyone, this is On This Restart, and today I want to talk about why I believe people are going to be buying Metroid Dread when it comes out on October 8th. Now this video may end up being a bit of a response video to a video that came out a few days ago from Game Explain. It was done by a swell guy by the name of Joey Ferris. I will link his Twitter in the description below and also that Game Explain video. But the basic idea that was discussed there is buy Metroid Dread. And it's a bit of a joke because, you know, you are allowed to make whatever decision you want to make. You don't have to buy Metroid Dread if you don't want to. But what Joey so eloquently described in the video is that there is an apparent desire to buy Metroid Dread amongst the gaming collective right now. That is the sense. And there are signs pointing towards that already, and he pointed towards some sort of reasons why that may be happening. But I sort of want to continue that conversation a little bit more and talk about why people are going to be buying Metroid Dread when it comes out next month. We are less than a month away from the release of Metroid Dread, Metroid 5. Finally, we are getting continuation of the Metroid story after so many years. This is exciting, this is great stuff. So that's what we're talking about today, why people are going to buy Metroid Dread. Now before we jump into things, let me very quickly talk about my social media. You may see a few different things here on screen. You can check that all out. It is linked in the description below. And of course, if you like what you're seeing here, you can subscribe. So we could talk about how there's already a lot of signs pointing towards strong Metroid Dread sales, with it being the top of multiple pre-order charts on different selling websites such as Amazon. Or we could talk about how on the Wii U eShop, the best-selling games as of late have been Metroid games. Those are all great indicators that people will be buying Metroid Dread. And in Joey's video, he also talked about how nowadays Metroidvanias are far more popular. During the big sort of Metroid hiatus, a lot of indie games came out, and a lot of those indie games were Metroidvanias, games inspired by Metroid and Castlevania that were pretty darn good, and they've gained a certain level of popularity that didn't exist back when Metroid used to see a more frequent release schedule. So that also likely is a strong contributing factor to why Metroid Dread may be selling pretty well. Metroid Dread is going to be the Metroidvania. Metroid Dread could end up being a Game of the Year contender kind of game, and that may seem kind of crazy to suggest that a Metroidvania could do that, but we've seen some pretty impressive indie titles over the last few years that weren't maybe that far off of maybe getting that level of consideration. And we just take a look at everything they're doing with Metroid Dread, there seems to be a certain level of polish and quality that you just don't see from a lot of other games. From a visual perspective, Metroid Dread certainly is a looker. It's standing out, it's definitely going to be considered one of the best looking games to come out on Switch this year. And it's doing some very interesting things with its visual style. It's not just a 2.5D Metroid in the sense that, yes, you are scrolling from left to right or up and down, and there are technically 3D polygons that you can see. It goes beyond that. It satisfies that moniker of 2.5D more so than pretty much any other game I can think of right now. What we've seen from Metroid Dread so far is that it has blurred the lines a little bit between 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions. There are moments where the camera pulls behind you from behind the shoulder where you can shoot things down. There are moments when you transition into a cutscene that seems dynamic where you may have some access to your missiles or actual beam weapons during a potential cutscene, and it's all a seamless transition from gameplay to cutscene. The cutscenes are in engine and you get a better look of the environment. These environments are being designed in 3D. But going beyond the visuals, there's also something to the atmosphere of Metroid Dread. This time around, they're really trying to capitalize on that concept of dread. Metroid games have always dabbled with fear and suspense, but this time around it seems like they're trying to go even deeper with that. We've seen the Yemi and how they can pursue you, but now we're learning about this Chozo warrior. There's a history here, there's a lore here. So it's not just the gameplay, but also the history and story of the game, and all of these different elements seem to be intertwining together along with that visual style and those fluid transitions between gameplay and cutscene. It's all sort of coming together to deliver what I think is going to be a very, very compelling package. And it appears Nintendo also seems to have a great deal of confidence in this game as well, because it had more of a focus at E3 than any other game. Metroid Dread was shown off during Nintendo's E3 Direct, but then to open things up, they had a fairly substantial developer diary from series director Yoshio Sakamoto. And then after that, they jumped into the first Treehouse segment of the day, which was all about Metroid Dread. But what did they close out the Treehouse with? Metroid Dread again. It was the only game that had 2 Treehouse segments, and if you include the developer diary, there's certainly a fair bit of focus on Metroid Dread, more so than any other game at Nintendo's E3. But then going beyond that, we got the announcement for Nintendo Switch OLED, which is coming out on October 8th, which is the same day as Metroid Dread. The game they use to open things up is Metroid Dread. They are hard marketing Metroid Dread alongside the Switch OLED. And might I add that Switch OLED, certainly from a aesthetic perspective, matches up pretty darn well to the Emmy, a very prominent and important enemy in Metroid Dread. And over the last few months, we've been seeing a lot of tweets and social media things from Nintendo about Metroid Dread, including the different Metroid Dread reports every week or so. And I have an expectation that with a potential Nintendo Direct this September, they'll be giving Metroid Dread another really big push. Nintendo is going all out here when it comes to marketing, I would say. I don't think Nintendo has ever pushed Metroid this much ever before, and I think that is going to lead to some pretty strong sales. People are going to pick up on that if they haven't already, and they're going to give Metroid Dread a try. The game looks awesome. The visuals are great. The gameplay has quite a bit of variety. There's a fair bit of atmosphere from what we see in the trailers and such. This game is impressive looking, and Nintendo knows that. And considering what Mercury Steam, the team that is helping to develop Metroid Dread, did with Samus Returns, and that Nintendo is also working closely with them, it is looking like this game is going to be a very polished, high-quality title. So when we do get closer to release, those reviews are probably going to be pretty strong and compelling, and that will further help to sort of sell this game, and more people will be invested in it. In terms of ambitious titles from Nintendo, Metroid Dread is kind of it for this year, for this latter half of the year, close to the holiday season. People don't like it when I say Metroid Dread's a holiday title because it comes out October 8th, but it is in the final 3 months of the year, and it is looking to be pretty impressive. It is coming out in October, where Nintendo likes to release some of their biggest, best games. I think it's gonna do really well, especially when you consider the Switch effect. In general, games on Switch sell better than other platforms. The Switch has sold many units, but not only has it sold many units, it's also sold a great deal of software. The people that are buying Nintendo Switch are actually buying games. I think a lot of this has to do with the portability of the system and just how comfortable it is to use and how it adapts to the different play styles or lifestyles for different people, so people can find different ways to play the games they want at different times and places, so people are more willing to buy games for their Switch. Pretty much every franchise that's come from Nintendo has had its best-selling entry on the Nintendo Switch, and in most of those cases, by a significant margin, and the Switch is still selling units. We're not even at the end of the Switch's life cycle. There are still a few years left here, and the Switch still has yet to become the best-selling system from Nintendo, yet it has some of the best-selling entries from some of their biggest, best franchises ever. The Switch effect is a very real thing, so when you factor that on top of the fact that, yes, people are more willing to play Metroidvania-style games now, on top of the fact that Nintendo is pushing and marketing this thing, on top of the fact that this is looking to be one of the higher quality Metroid titles we've ever seen, not to say that there haven't been some great Metroid games, the Metroid games in general are of the highest quality, but Metroid Dread is looking to be a very good one. All these things are coming together, and I think it's all going to amount to incredible sales, and for sure, Metroid Dread will be the best-selling Metroid game to date. But there's another factor I want to consider here, because it isn't like Nintendo hasn't tried marketing before. Sure, I feel like Nintendo is doing a better job of marketing Metroid now than they have done in the past, but Nintendo has tried marketing in the past. Nintendo's also had consoles that have sold quite a bit, and their software sales haven't been nearly as strong. Take the Nintendo Wii, for example. That system sold over 100 million units, yet Metroid Prime 3 didn't even come close to 2 million. Metroid Prime 1 sold over 2 million on the Nintendo GameCube, which only sold about a fifth as many consoles. Why is that? Well, a lot of that thing has to do with the culture of the people who are buying that system. It kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, how the people who buy Nintendo Switch are buying games. The reason why the Switch is doing so well, or at least in part, is because the way it is, it functions for a lot of people, a lot of different lifestyles, but those kinds of people who want the Switch are the kinds of people who play games, and they want the Switch because it gives them different ways to play the games they want. So yes, people who buy a Switch buy more games. It's not like the Nintendo Wii, where the majority of the people who bought that were just buying it for Wii Sports and Wii Fit and Wii Music. The Wii actually had a fairly small audience when it came to hardcore gamers. Most of them were casuals. They weren't interested in the typical Nintendo game. The Switch is home to all types of gamers, including lots that love Metroidvanias because indies sell really well on the Switch, but also the marketing that Nintendo is doing now, the point I was trying to get to, I think is going to work better than it has in the past because more people are going to see it now because of the way things work now. Social media. Nintendo can tweet about things or put out a video on YouTube, and that alone will market their product. It isn't like before, in the early 2000s, where they would have to pay a lot of money to get a commercial on TV or in the Super Bowl, and even then it still wouldn't necessarily yield the most incredible results. Things are very different now. When there's a great game out there, people learn about it. Social media works. Word of mouth through the internet does an incredible job. Nintendo used to love to talk about word of mouth. They used to love to rely on word of mouth back in the day. That's what they used to talk about in terms of how they would market things. They would rely on others to market things for them. But back in the early 2000s or the 90s, internet wasn't as prevalent. Social media was not as prevalent, but now it is. So with that in mind and everything else we've discussed in this video, people are going to know about Metroid Dread. People are going to have a pretty good idea of the kind of quality game we're going to be getting here. Sure, we don't know how good it's actually going to be, but the consensus vibe is that Metroid Dread is going to be incredible. And us Metroid fans are excited, which is why a lot of us like to say, buy Metroid Dread, or as I'm trying to coin more recently, hashtag buy Metroid Dread. Because if you buy it, you will enjoy it, you will appreciate it, and if Metroid sells well, yeah, Nintendo's gonna come out with more Metroid games. It isn't me trying to help a big company trying to sell better here, but it's more of me just wanting to sort of share in my love for Metroid. I want other people to try out Metroid because I know it's incredible, and I know that the developers and the artists behind Metroid Dread are working very hard, and I believe very strongly that they are going to deliver an incredible work, and I want other people to enjoy that alongside me. So, buy Metroid Dread, join the hype train. I think it's going to be awesome, but of course you have to decide for yourself if it's worth it, but I think it will be. Anyways, everyone, that's why I think a lot of people are going to be buying Metroid Dread, but what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. This is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care.